So today we have the potato PC out again. The only time I pull this system out is when I'm showing you guys how to install Windows 11 on unsupported hardware. That's technically not what we're doing today, but at the same time, it kinda is. What I'm actually showing you today is the version of Windows 11 that Microsoft should have released. This is a factory debloated version of Windows 11 without the ridiculous system requirements, and it's really easy to bypass the Microsoft account. Stay tuned. So as someone that does videos on Windows, I hear a lot of issues that people have with Windows PCs, Windows 11 specifically. People share in the comments all the time why they don't like Windows 11. Many of these issues I completely agree with. These can include the hardware requirements, the bloatware, or the Microsoft account requirements, and even the amount of updates that are constantly changing the way Windows 11 works. Well, today we're going to look at a version of Windows 11 that doesn't have any of these problems. This version is Windows 11 LTSC, which stands for Long-Term Servicing Channel. Not only are we going to talk about it, but I'm going to show you how you can install it without violating the Microsoft license. But first, I got to pay some bills. So check out today's sponsor. Is your copy of Windows 10 unactivated? Well, it doesn't have to be, because with today's sponsor, VIP-SCDKey, you can get a valid Windows 10 license for under $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark on the desktop, the valid license for Windows 10. Also, with an activated copy of Windows 10, you can upgrade to Windows 11 for free. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 10 license key. During checkout, use the code CyberCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 10 and click on the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark that come with running an unactivated copy of Windows 10. Now, on with the video. So Windows LTSC, like I stated before, stands for Long-Term Servicing Channel. This is a version of Windows that Microsoft makes for volume license customers that is designed for stability and long-term support. This is just another version of Windows, kind of like Windows Home and Pro. But unlike Windows Home and Pro, this version of Windows wasn't created for home desktop computers in mind. Instead, it was created and is marketed towards businesses, and is even the version of Windows that's used in a lot of Windows-based devices like ATM machines or POS systems. I bet you most bank teller machines are running Windows LTSC too. Now, up until recently, this version of Windows was only available in Windows 10, but now we have the Windows 11 version of LTSC. What makes this version different from the standard Home or Pro versions of Windows is the fact that this version of Windows was designed with long-term support and stability in mind. Because of this, LTSC doesn't have annual build updates like regular builds of Windows does. It doesn't come with most of the bloatware that Home and Pro come with, and it also has considerably lower system requirements. In fact, the system requirements are actually reasonable. They are a 64-bit dual-core processor that's at least 1 gigahertz, 2 gigs of RAM, 16 gigabytes of storage, and that's it. There's no TPM or secure boot requirements like Windows 11 Home and Pro, and there's also no approved processor list. So basically, the system requirements are like every other version of Windows throughout history before Microsoft threw a wrench in everything by making Windows 11 system requirements completely absurd. Now, there is, however, a Microsoft account requirement, but it's as easy to bypass as it was during Windows 10. Just unplug your Ethernet cable and it'll let you create a local account. It's literally that easy. And another benefit of LTSC is in the name, Long-Term Servicing Channel. While Windows 11 24H2 Home and Pro will be supported by Microsoft for 3 years, Windows 11 LTSC, which is based on the 24H2 version of Windows 11, will be supported for 10 years in its current form. That means there won't be a 25H2 or a 26H2 of Windows 11 LTSC. It'll be exactly like it is right now for the next 10 years. Now, Microsoft does release a new version of LTSC every 2 or 3 years or so, but you're not required to update to that version. You can still run this version for the next 10 years and be completely in support. In fact, Windows 10 LTSC won't lose support until 2032. That's kind of depressing if you think about it, because it's based on Windows 10 21H2. So Microsoft will be making updates for Windows 10, but just won't be offering them to you after October of this year. But instead of sitting here and talking about it all day, let's jump on the computer and I'll show you how to install a legitimate copy directly from Microsoft, because that's one of the downsides of LTSC. The licensing is kind of absurd, but we're going to talk about that later in the video. For now, we're going to install the evaluation version of LTSC, so make sure you don't install this on your main system. Either install it on a spare SSD like I'm doing today, or on a system that doesn't matter. So let's jump on the system and I'll show you how to set it up. So here we are in Windows 11, and there's a couple of different ways you can install this. You can either install it directly from the ISO by just mounting it on the desktop and just overwriting your existing operating system, or you can create a USB drive to install this like we're going to be doing today. But the first thing you're going to need is you're actually going to need the ISO, and to get the ISO, you're going to have to go to the Windows 11 Enterprise LTSC website, and I'll go ahead and leave a link to this down in the description below. And what you're going to want to do is click right here where it says download Windows 11 LOT Enterprise LTSC. And when you click on this link, it's going to ask you to register for a free trial. And this one, just fill in whatever you want here. I'm going to go ahead and fill in my information here. Now, you don't have to put a real email address in. In fact, I would recommend not doing a real email address, because why would you want spam? Just fill it out the best way you can and put in whatever information you want. I don't think it checks any of this information, and it really doesn't matter all that much. So all we're doing there is signing up for permission to use their evaluation. And we're just going to go ahead and go through here, and I have no idea if that's going to work. It's obviously a fake number, but we'll give it a try. And sure, I would like to share my information with partners. No, I actually wouldn't. Okay, click download now once you fill it out, and it should send you to the next page, which will give you the option to download different versions of LTSC. So some of these right here are like the ARM version or the x64 version, which obviously we're going to be installing that. And it also goes down and it gives you all the different stuff that you need to know about installing this, like the prerequisites and things of that nature. But you can read that if you want. I'm just going to click this link here, and it's going to start downloading the ISO. And the ISO is slightly smaller than a regular Windows 11 ISO, but once we get it installed, you'll see that there's nowhere near as much room used as there is in a full install of Windows 11. But for that, it's going to take about 9-10 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and download that, and I'll skip to once it's downloaded. Okay, so our download finished here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and click on here to open up our ISO. And like I said before, we can either just double click the ISO, mount it in Windows, go ahead and click on open, and it'll open the ISO as a regular drive letter on your computer, and you can just click the setup key from there. However, that's not the way we're going to do it today. I'm going to go ahead and go back into our downloads directory, and we're going to create a USB drive out of this. And to do that, we're going to need Rufus. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to download Rufus. Like always, I typically always get the portable version of Rufus. So go ahead and click on that and download it. And I'll leave a link to this down in the description below. So we can go ahead and minimize this, and here we have Rufus down in our downloads directory as well. So we're going to double click that. We're going to hit yes. And then I would hit yes to this right here. And then Rufus should open. Now you're going to need a USB drive. Now for this, I'm actually using a 64 gig USB drive because that's what I had available to me for this video. But you can use any drive that you want. Once you get that plugged in, go ahead and push the select button. We're going to select the ISO from our downloads directory that we just downloaded. Go ahead and hit open. And it's going to take a second to go through the process of detecting what ISO it is that it's setting up a USB drive for. So it might take a second, and there we go. Now it's ready to go. Now on this one right here, there's one thing that you have to keep in mind. If you're installing this on a system that supports a UEFI BIOS, then you can go ahead and leave it GPT. But if you're installing this on an older system that only supports an MBR BIOS, then you're going to have to change this to MBR and create an MBR version of this USB drive. Now, This is all going to be dependent on your system. I'm going to go ahead and create a GPT one because I'm installing it on the system we're currently using. And at that point, you can just go ahead and hit start to create the USB. Now, Rufus has the ability to disable system requirements, but we're not going to do that because we don't have to. With LTSC, it doesn't have these ridiculous system requirements in the first place, so we don't have to uncheck this stuff. We can go ahead and leave this completely default. And at that point, go ahead and hit OK. And this screen is pretty common with Rufus 4.6. And to get by it, all you got to do is hit OK. And then at this point right here, it's going to warn you that it's going to destroy all the data on the USB drive to continue. Now, I'm not going to because I've already created this USB. As you can see, this USB already is LTSC. So instead of wasting the time to create it again, I'm just going to hit cancel. But for you, I would go ahead and push OK in order to create the USB, and then we can move on to the next step. Now, like I said, when you create this USB, you have to make sure in Rufus you plan on installing this on a system that does not support UEFI. You have to choose MBR as your boot method. Otherwise, your USB drive won't boot on your system. If you are installing this on a UEFI system, then leaving a GPT is fine. In fact, it's preferable. And now, because we're using Rufus to create the USB drive, it can remove the hardware requirements from Windows 11. However, that's just not necessary with LTSC. That's one of the reasons why I have the potato system out here today. Since the purpose of this potato system's life is just to test different ways to install Windows 11 on unsupported hardware, I had to test it on this at least. So I installed LTSC numerous times on this system, which fails every single system requirement for Windows 11. And it worked perfectly every time. Now today, I'm not going to be using the potato system for this video. So you're just going to have to trust me on that. But I'm going to be using the main system that I have right here. So once your USB is finished, I'll meet you in Windows Setup. Let's get to it. Okay, so here we are in Windows LTSC setup. This should look exactly like Windows 11 setup. So what you're gonna have to do at this point is whatever way it takes for your system to boot off of a USB, you'll have to follow those directions, either the manufacturer's website or your motherboard manufacturer's website. But once you figure out how to boot from a USB, you should be in the same spot that I am here. So we're just gonna go through the setup here. I'm gonna leave everything pretty much default. We have to agree that we're gonna delete all the files in the system, that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Going to have to accept the license agreement. And then at this point, we have to go set up our disks. Now, you could, if you wanted to, just format your main hard drive and just go ahead and hit next. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and delete all the partitions related to the old operating system we have. And the main reason why I do that is because it makes sure that there's nothing on the system that's left over from before. And especially when in some cases, if you don't do that, you'll have multiple different operating systems you can boot into. Like you'll have one for Windows Pro and one for LTSC. But if you click on Windows Pro, it won't actually work. It'll just boot to LTSC because it's the only operating system on the computer. The easiest way to do this is just delete all the partitions from your primary hard drive and then go ahead and create a new partition. Just make sure in this case you don't delete the partitions on your USB drive that's accessible from this partitioning system right here, because if you do that, then you're going to essentially make it so you can't install Windows at all, because all Windows are on this partition right here. So make sure that you don't delete that. But once you get to this point right here, then you can go ahead and hit next to start installing the operating system. And then again, go ahead and hit install. Now, I just have to say, I really hate the new 24H2 partitioning tool. It's slow, it's clunky, and the older tool wouldn't show the USB drive. So if you delete the USB drive, you're not only not able to continue installing Windows, but you also just deleted all your partitions. So you have no way to create another USB drive unless you go to another computer. This is kind of stupid. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this thing get to work in installing Windows, and I'll meet you once we're at the next point in Windows setup. Okay, so here we are in the next step of Windows setup. And just like before, we're just gonna go ahead and follow this just like we would any other install of Windows. Just go ahead and hit all the default properties. I'm not changing anything here. So we're going to check for updates. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead until the update check is finished and we'll move on. Okay, so here we are in the Microsoft account requirements. So like I said earlier in the video, this version of Windows does require a Microsoft account. However, bypassing it is extremely simple. Literally all you have to do is unplug your Ethernet cable and click on the sign-in options, and it will immediately allow you to create a local account. Let me show you how to do it. So essentially, I'm just gonna reach back here, unplug my Ethernet cable, just like that, and then we'll jump on the computer and I'll show you what's next. Okay, so just like I said, click on the link here that says sign-in options and boom, local account. So I'm gonna go ahead and type my name as the screen flickers a few times because I think it's currently installing the display driver as we're setting up. I'm gonna go ahead and hit next. I'm gonna skip the password and we're gonna skip next again. We're gonna go ahead and uncheck all of these different links, just like you would on any other Windows install, and push the accept button. Now at this point, it's gonna go through and it's gonna want to install different updates. So at this point, you should plug your Ethernet cable back in and then Windows will go ahead and finish things up for you. So I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit to the next section and we'll continue on from there. So at this point, it's going to take a little bit for setup to finish. It's going to download some updates and then eventually you'll reach your desktop like it just did here. Now, I had my Ethernet unplugged, but normally it would download all the updates before it brings you to the desktop. But it looks like in this case, a good way to skip that is to just keep your Ethernet unplugged. But anyway, let's jump back on the system and I'll show you what Windows 11 LTSC is all about. So as you can see, when you first start up, you have practically nothing in your start menu. You have Edge, of course, because Microsoft has to include that on everything. You have Settings and File Explorer. Now, if we click on All Apps right here, as we scroll through, as you can see, there's literally nothing installed. You have Calculator, you have Notepad, the NVIDIA control panel installed because I have an NVIDIA video card, and then Paint, the snapping tool, and Windows Backup. That's essentially it. You have practically none of the bloatware that normally would come with Windows 11. Now, if we go ahead and click on Settings right here, and then from Settings, I'm going to scroll down to About, and as you can see, we're running Windows 11 LOT Enterprise LTSC. Now, this is the evaluation version, so it's only going to be good for 90 days. You can play around with it for 3 months, see how you like it, and at that point, they want you to get the full licensed version, obviously. But while we're in Settings, I'm going to go ahead and click on Apps, and then click on Installed Apps, and as you can see, there's literally nothing installed on this system. The graphics driver and the control panel obviously were installed because of my graphics card, but the system by default comes with Edge, Paint, Remote Desktop, and the snipping tool. And that's all. In fact, if you go ahead and click on the Start button, click on All Apps, and you look at some of these, like for instance, we'll go ahead and launch Notepad. This is the old Notepad. It's not the new version that has tabs. Now, you also might notice that you also have no Windows Store here. So because you have no Windows Store, it's kind of hard to get some of the other Windows components, like if you want terminal and things of that nature. However, it is possible to install the Windows Store, and then once you install the Windows Store, you can go ahead and install terminal and things of that nature. But it is kind of nice to have a version of Windows 11 where your problem is installing software and not removing software. So like I said, this is the version of Windows 11 that Microsoft should have released. Now, aside from the UI changes, which I understand some people don't like, this doesn't have any other downsides that Windows 11 typically would have. I even took the time to check to see if Windows Recall is enabled like it is on Home and Pro, and it's not. Since LTSC doesn't get feature updates and only receives security updates, I don't see Recall coming to this version of LTSC. So, this sounds like the perfect version of Windows 11, right? But of course, there's a catch, because there's always a catch. While licensing is pretty simple for Windows 11 Home and Pro, you can even get a great deal on a Windows license from this video's sponsor. When it comes to Windows 11 LTSC, not only is the licensing more complicated, but it's not even available for home users. That's right, the best version of Windows 11 that Microsoft has ever released is not for sale. At least, not to you. The only way you can get a license for LTSC is through volume licensing. Essentially, you have to be a big business. Now, if you work for a big business, you might be able to talk to your system admin and see if he can get you a license. But for a regular, everyday people, you're just out of luck. Now, I think this is unfortunate for a couple of reasons. For one, this is a copy of Windows 11 24H2 without the stupid hardware requirements, and it comes directly from Microsoft. So it's clear that even they know that older systems like this one can run Windows 11 just fine. So much, I guess, for being environmentally friendly, because when October of this year rolls around, there's going to be more e-waste created because of the Windows 11 system requirements than anything that I can think of in modern history. While all along, Microsoft has a version of Windows 11 that would run most of those systems, but they just won't sell it to you. Or it falls asleep when you don't want it to. So Microsoft, if you're listening to this, this is the answer for Windows 10 loses support in October. Either allow people to license LTSC or create a Lite version of Windows 11 that's targeted to home users. We know you can do it because this right here is awesome. Let us have this right here. We want it. Luckily though, there's lots of ways to run LTSC, but I can't share those with you in this video because it'll probably get taken down by YouTube. So all I can say on that subject is Google is your friend. But if you want to stay legitimate with a licensed copy of Windows, then there are other options. I did a video a while back that you can find right here, where I show you the easiest way to install a debloated copy of Windows 11 on unsupported hardware by simply creating an unattended answer file. This will install Windows 11 without you having to do anything. So as always, you guys have a great day.